As the days get darker, well, sometimes it gets bright too. We're here with Bright Memory Infinite. We're here to talk about Bright Memory Infinite, and this is a very small development team that produced this really high-stakes, high-speed shooter. And if I could just kind of explain what this is about a little bit, it's taking on the role of a responder to some paranormal events. That kind of is the best way I could describe it. You receive the call to duty where you have to go investigate this thing and put down any sort of threats to society. And largely that's just about the amount of story you're told, but that's all secondary to the action. What was your first impression getting into this one?
Well, I mean, graphically, this game is stunning. I'm playing on a lower-end PC, so even on low settings, this game is still great looking. And like you said, the story, you're not really given much, especially because there was a game before this in 2019, and I'm guessing maybe if we played that, we would know better of the universe. But that aside, man, the combat is what absolutely takes this to the next level. It's this blend of kind of this Doom style combat where you're running around and dodging, but you also have this ability where you have a sword and you're parrying bullets and melee attacks, and it's just, man, it's so exciting. I can't even hide the excitement that this game brought me. It's not a very long game. We're looking at maybe 8 to 10 hours. It's, but for what you get, man, it's 8 to 10 hours chock full of intense action. There is a upgrading system, much like, I don't want to say Doom, but you can upgrade your weapons, which there are 4 different weapons. You can also upgrade your left arm or your sword. So it's not very in-depth, but the abilities you unlock just add that much more fun to the combat.
Yeah, they really kind of bring on a second system there. The upgrades aren't very deep, but they do unlock different abilities with your hand and your sword, so you're able to kind of respond to different enemies as they get tougher and tougher as the game goes on. And I think that's kind of one of the most signature things about the combat in this game, is a lot of the time you're parrying and just dispatching enemies with the sword. It's almost secondary to pull out the weapons, the guns, and start firing back. But sometimes, and this is probably my favorite thing about the combat, is it really does challenge you. I'm playing on the second hardest setting, so not quite full difficulty, but it has a lot of moments where you come up against these large, imposing enemies, and a lot of the time you have to use the sword. You have to parry or punch with the cyborg hand in order to achieve some effect on the enemy and actually do damage. So it's not just a matter of putting the reticle on the enemy and squeezing the trigger. It's a little more deep than that, and that's something that really stood out to me. The combat is absolutely the focus, but I think the game kind of suffered from a little bit of a pacing issue. There's some things that kind of feel a little bit slapped in there, like the leveling system, where it has a function, it is interesting, but it didn't quite match the same level that the combat achieved. And some of these things that come to mind is at the driving section, kind of like a little James Bond moment where you're shooting rockets at other vehicles and stuff. It's kind of wacky. There's other moments where you're traversing over different buildings and rooftops, using a grappling hook to get around, but again, that doesn't come up in combat, so it just kind of felt as an aside. There is a couple little stealth moments where you're not quite fully powered. You have to kind of keep an incognito profile, and that again felt a little weird, contrasted with the heavy, hard action. It just kind of seemed weird to be a quiet person, but it matched the kind of lack of story. There is story elements. They are kind of spoken to you in exposition. You get a few phone calls from your boss, but it doesn't really go deeply into the universe. And I think that's something that the game kind of suffers from. But that's really the end of my gripes. I've had some little technical issue, but I think those were one-offs. And otherwise, this game is absolutely impressive, considering it came from possibly one person.
That's what everyone's saying, man. I did a bunch of research on this, and it was a solo developer that consists of one person. The fact that one person crafted all of this game is just mind-blowing, man. This is a AAA quality game. Pretty much. There are, like you said, a couple little things with the pacing, and even like parts in the story where I was heavily under fire and I went inside a wooden hut, and then it was like, okay, I'm safe now. It's little kind of like cheesy things like that, but that's not what this game is focusing on. It's the combat, it's your upgrading your suit to unlock these new abilities and just kind of push you forward. And maybe the developer wants mystery within this universe. Maybe that's like, I'm really interested to know more, and I really hope to get more from this universe. So I guess if we were to have to score this, man, this game was a fantastic time. All 8 hours of it, at least. There's replayability because you can kind of go a different route while you're upgrading. There's quite a bit of freedom within that. So man, this game, solo developer, it's getting a 9 for me, man. I cannot hold back. It's 9.
Oh no, I match that same excitement. The combat was absolutely the focus, and it did a great job. The story was serviceable, I'll say that, and it absolutely looks amazing. My PC is a little bit higher end. I'm running that ray tracing, and it's gorgeous. And really, I echo the same sentiment. I really want to learn more about this world, these factions, the kind of fantasy elements that come into play, and there's a lot of really interesting things. I think this is a massive series, just at its infancy, and I'm there just behind you. I have giving this an 8.5.
Nice.
A AAA quality shooter developed by such a tiny company, Bright Memory Infinite relies on fast-paced, high-intensity action to guide you through a gorgeous environment.